So Andre, you streamed the entirety of Super Mario RPG's new remake over the course of a couple days for a very long time. Let's get your overall thoughts on it.
Yeah, this game is good. It's pretty much a near perfect remake of the original game. I grew up with the original, I loved it as a kid, and as it turns out, I still pretty much love it as an adult. This game really it's almost surprised me with how fun it still is. And I was also surprised by how accurate this remake is. I say it's a near perfect remake in the sense that they pretty much left it alone. They updated the visuals, they updated the music, and they added a few gameplay tweaks here or there, for the better or worse. I'll get into that later on. But by and large, this is the same game you remember, just looking better than ever, to the point that it could almost pass for a modern game. Now, there are some things about the gameplay and presentation that, very clearly make it a remake rather than a brand new game, but by and large, it holds up incredibly well, to the point where, initially I'm like, this remake's unnecessary. The original game still holds up, still looks good, still sounds good, and I think that's all true to a degree, but I went back and looked at the original game after playing this one. I'm like, ooh, okay, you know what, I am glad this exists, because it looks fantastic, and I've just been very happy with it. So, by and large, perhaps one of the best remakes I've seen, with just how incredibly faithful it is to the original game, including the script. And we'll touch on more on that later. I was afraid they would change it, but they pretty much kept it the same. I'm so happy about that, because the Ted Woolsey script was a classic. I'm so glad they largely kept it here.
It's actually really shocking just how accurate it is, because even when this was first announced back in like June, everybody was on one hand really excited, like, wow, Nintendo's bringing this game back. We never thought that would leave the vault. But at the same time, everyone was worried that they were going to start making significant changes. They were going to change, the writing for characters, or they were going to make the Toads more generic or something. Everyone was really worried about those things. But really what makes Mario RPG the iconic game that it is all still here. It's all these considered small details that change, that don't really take away from the whole experience. The whole experience is largely the same, and that's really surprising in this day and age, too.
It really is, especially from Nintendo. I actually expected more in the way of changes, and I'm so happy to see that they respected, by and large, what the original was. Because a lot of the charm did come through in the localization, which was basically handled by one guy, and it's amazing what he was able to pull off with the limited amount of time he did. And I'm glad that Nintendo respected the work he did. They updated a few names, they pulled back or changed a couple of references, but by and large the script is 95% identical to the original, including to the point where there are things in this game I'm surprised are still here, because I thought for sure either A, Nintendo would change it, which they didn't, or B, it's something they would never get away with today. You have Toad talking about how he forgot his bazooka at home. It's like, all right, I don't think we'd see that in the Mario movie or something.
No.
And there's a few other handful of moments in that. I'm like, wow, yeah, this is really sharp, and I'm glad they kept that. So the game is just a lot of fun overall. I think what this remake really does is it allows the gameplay to shine through. The gameplay's always been a strong suit, and now that they've modernized the presentation, the gameplay is still a ton of fun. The battle system, still simple but deep enough that it makes you, to a degree, have to at least consider what you're doing at points, although perhaps to a lesser degree than the original, which I'll talk more about too. But also, this game is just so varied. There's constantly new things happening, new mini games or new events. You're running up a hill chasing Princess Peach at one moment, or you're, riding in a minecart trying to rescue a small mole character. It's crazy. This game's nuts, and I love it for it.
No, it really is where a lot of the charm of this game comes from. It's how you're constantly doing different things. It may be an RPG, you may be primarily roaming an overworld and going into turn-based battles, but there's a lot happening otherwise. It feels like every area of the game has a minigame, which, when you compare it to other Mario RPGs, the Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi games, you really don't see that as much. Maybe some here and there, but I forgot just how much this game had in terms of, the mini-games and the extra fun things to go and do. There's a lot of it here.
Yeah, there's a ton. Which is great, because it kind of speaks to, I don't know if it stands out as much these days. I'd be curious to hear how someone who didn't experience the original feels about this. But especially in the era it came from, it was from an era where there were RPGs were becoming a more popular genre, but they also had some of their drawbacks too that kind of limited their reach as well, a ton of random battles and having to grind your way through the game, and that's both things Mario RPG avoided largely. You didn't really have to grind. battles you could avoid almost all of them by just avoiding them on the world map. It had actual platforming, so it kept the Mario element there. It had a really fun sense of humor, which most RPGs kind of took themselves a little bit more seriously in that era. Like, I was surprised to see that they kept the Toad mocking Mario for not really knowing how a door works in the game. Like, all those little touches I love, and like, for me, still hold up. But I'm not one who engages with modern RPGs really at all, so I'd be curious, what a new person thinks about it. But yeah, there's just constant variation in what you're doing, so it means you can't really ever get bored of what the game's doing. Because even the battling, like I mentioned, it's you can only kind of skip the ones you don't want to do, minus bosses for the most part. But even when you do get engaged in battles, like, they go by quick, especially now to sped up the pace of combat, where to the point where it barely feels like you're being pulled away from whatever you were doing. And the battles are just fun too. I enjoy them. Like, they have this really good chunky feel to them with the timed attacks, and how the attacks look, and the sound effects too, which feel like they were almost ripped right from the original game. Like, it's all really well done.
It's incredibly faithful, and you're definitely right about how, like, the pace of the battles feel faster, especially with the Asha commands, and the fact that now, the Asha commands has a little bit more of a visual cue. You can kind of better understand what you're doing from the visuals. So for new players, or people that didn't play the original game, it helps it kind of come down from the more archaic feeling RPG game that this was originally. It makes it much more approachable. And that's not even mentioning, like, the easy mode. Like, they definitely really worked with this game's gameplay elements to make it more approachable today, which I think is really important.
It is, to a degree, though. I would also say, Triss, that's where one of my complaints with the game lies. Like, of course, it's great that it has an easy mode, though I almost don't know why you would need it. Because the core game has also been simplified. Or rather, I take that back. It hasn't been simplified, but it's also been, like, the difficulty's been, like, kind of...
scaled down?
Scaled down, I guess. I don't know how you would put it. But I think as a side effect of the new features they've added. Because now, on top of the faster combat, they've added splash damage to these timed attacks, which means you're... Basically, before, in most cases, if you wanted to damage everyone, you had to use a magic attack. But now you can just do that with your standard attacks, too. And so it kind of almost undermines the point of having... Not only does it undermine, to a degree, the magic attacks, but it also means you're just dealing a lot more damage in general. Right. On top of that, you now have the brand new special attacks, which... you get by getting combos, basically, or by doing proper timed attacks. Builds up a meter, then you do like a triple attack with all three of your party members. It looks cool. Those moves are pretty neat. But again, they're dealing a ton of damage to everyone on the screen for basically free with no consequence. And then, even when you do get wiped out, which happen to be rarely, but if you have a character die, you can now swap in a backup party member, which on the surface, I love the idea. That's actually really cool. It makes, especially now in the post-game where it's actually becoming more of a factor, right. I like the fact that the whole party is more involved in the combat. Great on the surface. Problem is, the main game has not been balanced for that at all. Like, all these changes make it so the main game is almost stupid easy. Like, I think I died once throughout my entire stream where I streamed the entire game. I forget where it was. It may have been near the end of the game even. I can't even remember. Maybe, I don't even fully remember. Point is, I did not have to think too hard about while playing this game. And to be fair, I'm also very experienced with the game, even though I hadn't played in maybe 10 years or so. But I knew, where most of the best armor was and all that, which definitely didn't help. But even then, I knew that as a kid too. And I remember having more trouble with the battles as a kid than I did here, where it was almost trivial, just, staying alive and taking out even bosses. I killed the second Bolum, what's his name? Bolum, thank you. In like under 2 minutes. I'm like, that's not how that battle should work.
That's notoriously like a longer one in the original, yeah.
Exactly, right.
It definitely seems like with the new features they added, a hard mode would have been appreciated. That maybe like turned off some of those features or limited some of it, just to kind of... This game was so good at capturing so much of the original. I think that would have helped it even more, just to, basically have a toggle to make it feel even more like the original one did.
Actually, yeah, there's two ideas for that, Tress. Yes, having a toggle to play more like the original, get rid of the special attacks, get rid of the splash damage, that actually would probably been the easiest solution.
Right.
But also, I would have been okay if they had rebalanced the game for experienced players. So give us a hard mode, make it so that the difficulty now accounts for the new features you've added to the game, and so that people who are experienced with it can be challenged again. I don't know why Nintendo's so against this, but just make it an option. We're like, hey, have you played Mario RPG before? Do you want a harder version? Here you go. Resident Evil 4 Remake recently did this. Like, hey, did you play the original? Then go into hardcore. And I would almost say that I went a little too extreme in that case, but regardless, the idea is good on paper. especially if you're able to change the difficulty anytime. So I really wish he had done that. And that's really honestly my biggest complaint. If they had resolved that issue, this would be a near perfect, basically a perfect remake, and there'd be almost no reason to go back to the original.
Wow. And that really says a lot too, considering, I mean, this isn't a game that we've known about for a long time. Like, it was revealed in June. It came out, like, just a few days ago, and the reception to it has been incredible. I mean, when you say near perfect remake, even I know, like, even us, like, we were doubting, like, is it really a perfect remake? Like, surely it's just gonna feel like the original. But I think after you doing your really long stream and spending a long time with it, I think it says a lot that you feel this way about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to go back to the original just to fully, ensure I truly feel that way in full compared to the original game. But I think, without having done that, I feel still pretty confident in that opinion that you really can just play this game and by and large get the original experience. Although I do think the difficulty is a noteworthy concern.
Right.
And I do think it does lose something for that. So that's why I can't say it straight up replaces it. But had it not been for that, I think it could have. Because everything else about this remake is just truly fantastic. The visuals are incredibly faithful and yet wonderfully updated. One of my favorite examples is in when you're Valentina's palace, in the sky, and they have these now like just beautiful windows along the walls, and it really just kind of changes the vibe. And normally I wouldn't be the biggest fan of changing the vibe, but I always didn't like how the original felt too much. I felt like kind of trapped and like claustrophobic in this really tiny, not tiny, but in these smaller enclosed environments when it's part of a larger palace. And I think and apparently the windows were always there, but you could barely tell before.
Yeah.
But having that light shining in, it just really kind of changes the feel of it, and also makes it feel like more of a grandiose landscape or environment. And I like that. And I think it really fits it well. But that's the case for like almost every area in the game. Like,
yeah,
I'm always afraid of like when you start changing things and updating things, you can change the essence of what it was. But they somehow, I think they nailed it here. Like almost every area evoked the feel of the original, only it looks better now. Like no longer do you have the weird blue voids that existed beyond your play space. Now like there's lovely backdrops, and that's great. Like it makes it feel like more of an actual like a physical space, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, I could just go on and on, but the music too, wonderful. Like they did, the soundtrack is fantastic. I still think the original game's music is really good, but they updated it here wonderfully. Like I forget who, do you remember who the composer is in this case?
Yoko Shimomura. Yoko Shimomura came back for it. She did the original and she came back for this, which is fantastic.
I love that. That's probably why it's so freaking good. She understood the essence of the original soundtrack and updated it perfectly. There's only maybe 2 tracks in the game that I'm like, I might prefer the original. Putting that aside, everything else, fantastic, amazing, and not only is it like it's faithful to the original, but they modernize it in a way too, where like they add these little flourishes or enhancements or like little extra segments. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Great job. So again, really, when it comes to the presentation, it is so perfect. Like to the point that the game is so faithful, it's almost more of a remaster than a remake. But especially with how people use remake these days, being like a reimagine type thing. But in any case, it's really well done.
Yeah, no, like especially with the visuals and the music, even those alone made this really exciting. Like getting these, not the SNES sprites with the really weird looking models for the characters and the visuals for the characters. Getting this in like the updated style with, everyone's favorite little like squished Mario that we have now.
It's really cute. Yeah, again, they did a great job capturing the feel of the original, but modernizing, which is impressive considering Mario RPG was known for being like cutting edge 3D graphics at the time. So striking that balance is actually really impressive that they managed to pull that off. That they managed to make it look good, respectful, and modernize it like all at the same time is really must have been a challenge, but they totally nailed it. I'm impressed. So yeah, when it comes to the and also we have to touch on the cutscenes too. They have a handful of new cutscenes in the game that replace or add to segments of the original. Also great. The only thing that stood out to me, for as lovely as they are, and I love seeing also Gino rendered in full 3D now, which is nice, wonderful. Yeah, but there is also on-screen captions because there's no actual talking, and that part felt a little weird to me. I'm like, I wish they'd add like some like at least noises for the characters, but dialogue would have been fine too, just something. But it does feel out of place when you see the mouths moving and nothing's coming.
Yeah, that is something I noticed too. Like just the level of detail with the cutscenes, you expect some sound to be playing with it, not just the background music, not just you know, not just text appearing as they move their mouse. Like, it almost feels like they wanted, like, even if it's just like the Paper Mario style, like ba 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 kind of noises as they're talking, something like that to indicate there's a voice happening.
Or the Mario and Luigi.
The Mario and Luigi style.
Yeah.
That's like actually my one real complaint with this game from everything I've played of it so far. It's a mix of that and cutscenes and the actual, like, when playing the game, like watching dialogue appear. There's no like feedback sound for going through like the dialogue bubbles. Right. And it like throws me off because I expect some sort of feedback on that. Like every other game doesn't. And it just some little like ding, like as it like finishes the text box and goes to the next one. There just isn't, and it feels jarring to me every time I'm playing it.
Did the original game have that? I can't remember.
I don't remember if the original had that, but
it had an arrow, and I feel like that arrow made a sound, but I could be misremembering. So
yeah, but like that's why it feels weird though, because like if the original did, even the original did. It's jarring that this doesn't have that kind of feedback, that audio feedback for advancing to the next text box. Again, really small thing, but it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those like. It's just something you're so used to in games that when it's not there, it's suddenly like, oh, what? Like it catches your attention because it feels wrong.
Speaking of feeling wrong, Triss, one of the features I was a little mixed on. I think I came around on mostly liking it. Okay. They added a new fast travel option too, so you can easily ignore it as well. Right. But basically, you can hop to almost any point in the game, any region, from any other. Which on the one hand, I was afraid that I might like. Cut down on the connected feel of the world, how you have to travel on the world map and all that, because now you can just hop around. You really almost don't even need the world map. And I feel like they could have just made it a shortcut to the world map instead, which may have been a better solution. In any case, I have to say the fast travel overall, I'm happy with, because what it means is you can now quickly exit Smithy's factory or Booster's tower and without having to backtrack all the way out. But that was a problem in the original. Whenever you revisit these locations, you have to kind of back your way out, and that was a little annoying. So I'm glad they fixed that. And I'm trying to think if there's any other changes I really ended up liking. They changed how the inventory works. Now you can only hold set amounts of each item, and then any extras go to like an inventory box and your house, Mario's pad. And I never even needed that. I never even bothered with going back to it. So it's neat that it exists. I'm still not fully sure how I feel about the inventory change, because before you could have however much of any item you wanted, but you were capped to basically two columns of items. Like every item took up the same amount of space. So I'm not sure which one's better balanced, but again, that still kind of affects the game balance, I think, for the better or worse.
No, it definitely does, because it either way, it still limits how much of items you can hold. So sure, yes, you can have, one of every kind of consumable item in the game, but if you're still limited at how many of each one you can hold, you still theoretically limited at how and when you use it.
Right, exactly. Just to go over a couple other complaints, I would say the isometric platforming hasn't held up amazingly well. There's a couple parts of the game where it's really difficult to make those jumps, especially if you're playing with a control stick, like a Pro Controller, I find. I preferred using the SNES controller myself, and it's not that big of a deal, but there were a couple moments in the game where I'm like, man, running diagonals way harder than it should be, and I was like falling off, these donut platforms or whatever. And then another minor complaint is just by and large, again, the script is pretty much identical, which again, I love, and some of the modernizations are fine, but there's a couple of changes that they made. I'm like, I wish I hadn't done that. And there's only a handful, but like, they pulled out the Bruce Lee line, which is fine, but they didn't replace it with another when I felt like they could have easily made a Nintendo-based joke, like replacing Bruce Lee with, Lil Mac or Min Min or something. That's suggested by my chat. So those are great ideas. They also changed a couple of character names, which, in some cases I think is fine, but like in the case of, I think, was a Yardovich, like that was such a distinctive name that and especially because it still made sense based on the Japanese translation, I believe, that they could have kept it and would have been fine. But the change that bothers me the most, Triss, is the one to when Mario becomes a statue.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
And the statue creator like justifies his creation. And in the remake, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Where he's explaining how Mario's mustache is reflective of his love for Luigi. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? What? But in the original, like, it's like, how it's reflective of his blue-collar roots. And I love that because it was a direct appeal to Valentina's, like, her whole personality and, why she would want to engage with a statue that looks like this, you know, like it's reflective of the common people and it's a reminder of that. And I felt like they'd completely missed the mark with that change. I'm not quite sure why.
It's definitely much nicer to Mario now, less insulting to Mario, which maybe is what they wanted to do. Have someone, they didn't want to have someone other than Bowser or someone that isn't the villain insulting Mario, but it does feel a little out of place what they describe it as now. It doesn't really fit as well now.
Yeah, it feels like it almost feels like they didn't trust the audience to understand what was happening there with the statue creator, like having to justify the statue to Valentina,
right?
And basically appeal to her vanity, you know. So yeah, I guess the only other thing I want to touch on really is the post games. There might be some slight spoilers here. So if you don't want to tune them out, you know, skip ahead a few minutes. There's probably a timestamp in the description.
Yeah, this is the other new content that they advertised. There is some level of post game now, which is
right,
a big
which
deal.
did not exist before. Yeah. So I haven't played all the way through it. I'm maybe halfway, 2/3 through, however far I am. But so far it's neat. Like I'm glad that it exists. I think it's cute how they address it with Mario waking up after beating the game, and he's like, wait, did that just happen? I guess not, you know? Okay, well, we can go rebattle enemies now, and then you can also go fight the final enemy again if you want. And so again, I haven't played through all of them, but the battles I have played through, which is several at this point, they're very difficult. And I appreciate that. Like, I wish I had a taste of that in the main game, because the main game is so simple now. I'm like, man, I wish I had some battles closer to this in difficulty, because it actually is making me think about my actions to the point where I took out one battle that's killing all my entire team instantly. I'm like, that's genius. I've really got to think about, you know, what I'm equipping, what moves I'm using, how I'm handling this, and so I'm very happy with that. I just wish the main game had been more reflective of it. And I also think it's cute how they brought in Star Hill as a starting point for this, with the wishes of the bosses you can replay now being reflected in new wishes on the hill. So that's really cool, really well done. And again, you know, maybe I'll like even more when I've finished it, but I think for what it is, for what I played, it's cute. So
that is nice, and it's a relatively simple way to add in new content. I mean, it's an RPG. People want stronger battles. We'll give them stronger battles. It's not it's not like on the story heavy side of things. It's not like you're adding in a whole new post game story people got to complete. It's adding in new content that wasn't there before, which I think is great.
It is great. Although I will say, Triss, it would have been nice if they had added like an actual new story or something, you know. I don't know how they would have done it, but that would have been awesome. And I do hope this opens the door to a proper sequel after all these decades. Give us a Mario RPG 2. Have Gino come back. I don't care how. Just make it happen. And I'm so happy that people get to experience what this game, you know, was now with a fresh new look. And, you know, definitely modernized in several ways. And, yeah, it's awesome that Gino is now, you know, a popular figure again.
And Mallow.
And Mallow, that's right. Who can forget Mallow?
But no, I think it's excellent that this game is now here and available for people, because it really hasn't been in a long time. Yeah, it might have, you know, released on like the Wii U eShop, for example, or the Wii store, like the Wii Shop channel, but like, unless they're like heavily marketing that, not everybody's gonna go and see that. Seeing Mario RPG front and center, like in a box on a shelf in a store in this day and age is incredible. And we never thought this day would come.
Yeah, we never did. So I really hope that it does open the way to a sequel, because that would be amazing. So I guess I should probably give this a review score.
Yeah. What do you think?
This is a review. So this could change over time. Right now, I'm at a high like a lot. I think this game is great, holds up really well, and I don't know if I'm enjoying it quite as much as I did as a kid. You know, obviously playing it again not as fresh as the first time. I also think the difficulty concerns I have are a factor, because it did impact, you know, the strategy part, which is a big part of RPGs. The fact that I barely even had to think about playing my way through this, which again may be owed to the fact that I've played through it before, but it definitely is easier this time. And I wish, you know, there had been a harder difficulty to address that, and that may have, you know, been enough to boost me up to a loved. Right now, though, strong, liked it a lot. Very good. super fun, one of the best remakes I've ever played, at least in a presentational sense. So I highly recommend it. A lot of fun, especially if you like the Paper Mario games. Definitely check out Super Mario RPG, which is where it all began. And I think also, just to give more credit to this game, so much of what we understand like modern Mario to be, even including in the Mario movie, like arguably originated here.
Yeah.
Like this is the first game to really flesh out the Mushroom Kingdom to any degree, make these characters into actual characters, give them personalities, actually make the Mushroom Kingdom feel like a real place, with the characters that actually evolve over the course of the game, even if in a largely limited sense.
Yeah.
But it's the first Mario game to present this cohesive world, even before Mario 64, and that is worth something. I think this game kind of often gets overlooked, probably because it hasn't been really properly re-released at all in a long time. And I think it's so awesome that people can finally relive the magic of what this game is, and I hope they're able to enjoy it at least as much as I did, if not more.
Me too. I think that capturing the magic is, like as you said, is probably the best way to put it. It's there in this remake, and I feel like you don't see that a lot in remakes, so that's something really pleasant about this one to enjoy.
Yeah, if this is how Nintendo handles remakes going forward, I'm all for it. Even if I would generally prefer sequels, if they have to do remakes, definitely stick to being as faithful as this one is, while modernizing in the ways they need to. Like, difficulty aside, they did a great job here, and I do like the new features. I just wish they didn't come at the expense of the difficulty. So, if Thousand Year Door Remake is anywhere near this caliber of quality, we're in for a really good time with that remake as well.
I hope so. Alright, well I think that's a good point to end this one on, so thank you guys so much for watching our review discussion of Super Mario RPG. Of course, we've had plenty of coverage of the game, so make sure to check that out if you haven't already, and stay tuned to GameXplain for plenty more on Mario RPG and other things gaming and Nintendo as well. Until next time though, farewell everyone.
Alright, cool.
All right.
How did that sound to you?
I think that came out really well.
Alright, good. Great. Yeah, I think it did